Welcome to Through the Corporate Glass, a podcast that explores career choices. We dive into the latest trends in tech careers, demystify industry roles, spotlight startups, and even explore unconventional paths outside the industry. Join us for authentic conversations that will challenge your assumptions and inspire you to think differently.
Welcome to a brand new episode of Through the Corporate Glass. I'm your host, Apurva. Generative AI is reshaping the world of UX design. And one of the most exciting innovations at its forefront is generative UI. Today, we'll explore what that means for the craft of design, the opportunities it opens up, the challenges it raises, and how it could shape design careers in the years ahead. To talk about this and so much more, I'm joined by Parikshit Deshmukh, the co-founder of Thesys, a company pioneering the future of user experience through generative UI. Parikshit has over a decade of experience shaping design at fast-growing technology companies. He was head of design and a founding member at DevRev.ai. Before that, he led design at requisitions.io, a fintech startup acquired by Stripe, which is one of the biggest SaaS requisitions, and was an early member of the design team at Nutanix. Welcome to the podcast, Parikshit. So excited to have you here with us.
Hey Apurva, thanks for inviting me. Super excited to our conversation.
I want to start right from the beginning. You began with an architecture background and then moved into user experience design, which I find really interesting because I've made a similar transition in my life as well. So I'm curious, can you tell me a bit more about that journey? What drew you from architecture into UX?
Oh, definitely. And I think you would relate to it being a fellow architect transitioning into this space. I started my journey in architecture because I was fascinated by how design shapes behavior in general, right? I mean, how placement of an opening, height of a space, rhythm of light across a corridor could change how people feel in a space. And architecture, in fact, taught me that design is really just the um, choreography of experience. It's about users and systems and their interaction, right?
Yeah.
And as the world went increasingly digital, I began to see that screens were also a new type of space where people lived in and people worked and people got entertained. It's almost like virtual architecture in a way. The same principles applied: proportion, hierarchy, navigation, and whatnot. Except now the materials were pixels instead of concrete and glass, and that realization pulled me into interaction design almost naturally. It felt like a natural extension to architecture, and in fact, it felt like the next step of like a next step in the evolution of architecture. So that was super enticing for me. Um, I mean, the tools are different, but the intent is the same, shaping how people experience a system, right? And a funny story, I remember in my interview with Microsoft, I had explained how designing an interface was like designing a building, right? And designing a space. Information had to have a structure, pathways needed like hierarchy, navigation, all those commonalities. The need of users to feel oriented, to perform something without instructions. That parallel really clicked with the team as well. That got me the job, and more importantly, it shaped how I, approached design in general since then.
Yeah, that's actually pretty interesting as well because you can hear that systems thinking mindset coming in through, even in how you describe design as well. And I guess that is the commonality between architecture and UX. It's like you said, probably an extension of design in itself. I think it's fascinating to see that the idea of moving from physical space to digital space is very natural, but you're still thinking about human flow and experience.
Absolutely.
I want to speak more of the systems. I imagine being a design founder. gives you a very different lens than somebody with an engineering or a business background, let's say. What was a turning point for you that inspired you to start Thesis?
I think being a design founder is very different, for lack of a better word. I mean, the great part is you can think like a user, you can relate with them, you can also visualize the product before it's built.
Yeah.
You can guarantee quality from the first draft, and it also helps in marketing. Design gives you a lot of clarity of story and trust in every touch point. And all of these things, they almost feel like a superpower in this industry. Like having a good story to tell and being able to tell that story, it almost makes you invincible. Now, as a designer, we naturally possess it, but um, I thought if I could apply this, and I was fairly eager to do that, um, to apply this, skill that we have, and that kind of pushed me to being a design founder. And of course, all the upsides that I mentioned, there are a couple of downsides too, right? I mean, designers tend to chase perfection, for an example. We often choose presentation over the speed, the velocity. So you also have to learn to let go of a lot of things you hold very dear. You have to be okay with shipping, imperfect things at a great speed. Um, and you have to kind of be okay with the fact that refinement is a process. It's not a deliverable, for an example. And while doing all of this, having a technically grounded co-founder makes that balance possible. For me, that's Rabi, my co-founder. Now he brings the structure, scalability, the reality check, and that allows me to push the creative boundaries without breaking the product. It's a rare balance, but I think being a design founder, utilizing your skills of looking at things differently, being able to relate to the user, being able to tell the story, and balancing it with technical aspects, logical aspects, business aspects. I mean, eventually you have to learn every single thing if you're running a business, but it's that balance that keeps things moving fast for you, and that's the balance that keeps things moving fast at Thesis while we still care deeply about the craft.
That's a powerful insight. I'm sure a lot of people will be inspired by what you just said, approaching the whole company building itself as a design problem, where you're just shaping not just a product, but the entire paradigm in itself. It sounds like that moment of realization that we all have that design could be just generated, not just handcrafted, maybe. It's a great segue too, because it sets the stage for what Thesis is pioneering. That actually brings me to my next question. And for listeners who may be hearing this term for the first time, Parikshit, can you describe what generative UI actually means and what this whole specific design challenge in UI pushed you toward that direction?
Absolutely. I mean, to see the future, we have to go back to the past. So
Yeah.
if you look at the history of interfaces, um, in the early 60s, we had like slots, right? Around 80s, we came up with terminals. And then around 2000s, we had like sleek UI, graphical interfaces that the amazing folks at Xerox and Apple made popular, right? So the evolution has always been towards something that's more visual, that's more tangible, more interactive, dynamic. But with the AI era, we've somehow, slipped back to the terminal age. Now people are again typing long prompts, getting long text answers. Um, and the reason is simple. AI isn't operating on static logic anymore, right? It's kind of pushing things to become more dynamic, more probabilistic in nature. Now, the problem is traditionally the UI was deterministic. What that means is a user went through the same, 7 steps every single time. And these 7 steps were what the designer has had designed, the developer had built. It was predictable, so we could design it all at once and call it done. But AI works on possibilities. Now, every user, every query, every data point can change this flow. So those 7 steps could become like 2 steps, become 20 steps, or could be a very different set of steps altogether. And that means the interface can't be fixed anymore. It has to, generate itself in real time. It has to adapt to the intent. It has to adapt to the context. It also needs to respect the choices and preferences of the user. It needs to learn the user and kind of personalize things for them. So this entire idea of generating an interface in real time based on user intent, context, and preferences, that's where the idea of generative UI comes from. The need for an interface that's as intelligent and adaptive as the AI behind it.
Right. In a sense, you're saying that it's less about automation and more about intent, adaptability, and responsiveness.
Yeah, I think it's a great balance between the human side of experience, which is the entire feeling that something was built for me, right? Invoking that feeling while using a technology that's probabilistic in nature.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it sounds like the perfect kind of user experience that we would have hoped for in the past, but now we can see that in reality.
Yep.
From a design perspective, what principles or frameworks guide the creation of generative UI? Do you actually start from user journeys, design patterns, or do you have like an established design systems where you begin with?
Interesting. So, I mean, for generative UI to really work, three things need to happen together, right? The first is the system has to understand the user. What that means is we need to understand their intent, their context, their preferences. What are they trying to do? What have they done before? What were their previous interaction? What matters most to them right now? Understanding all of that is the first layer of intelligence. The second layer is it needs to understand the data, logic, and tools behind the scenes. Basically, it needs to work really well with your backend logic. Because understanding language is one thing, but being able to fetch the right information, call the right tools, trigger the right workflows, that is what makes the system actually useful. So that's the second layer. The third layer is it needs to know how to render the interface in real time, right? So to take all the reasoning and turn it into something you can see, interact with, something that works. Because no matter how smart the system is, if it can't show that it's thinking, it stays, invisible, right? So you need to present it really well, and you need to do that in real time. In order to do that, the third layer, you need to have a UI library that's very malleable, and you need an intelligence to put the layout together. Now, once you do these three things, understanding the user, understanding the data and logic, and rendering interface in real time, then conceptually you can build generative UI. Until now, it was not possible, but now it is because LLMs are another piece uh, which makes it possible today. Now, LLMs have been the most groundbreaking technology in AI domain so far, right? At their core, they work by predicting the next best word or token based on everything they've learned from massive amounts of text. They're like probabilistic pattern machines trained to understand context, relationship, nuances, and they can reason. I mean, they don't just memorize; they can reason with things. But the thing is, they were built to generate language, end of the day, right? Large language model. So they don't generate interfaces. They can describe what should happen, but not necessarily show it. So while an LLM can say, hey, your sales in Asia grew 20%, it can't automatically decide to visualize that as a chart or render a dashboard to explore it further. And I think that's where C1 comes in. C1 is our API, Generative UI API by Thesys. It acts like a middleware between the LLM and the UI. I mean, it doesn't just take the model's text output and transform it outward afterwards. It actually augments the LLMs itself. So when the model is generating a response, C1 gives it a way of responding with UI, components, layout, states, and all those interactive things. So instead of model saying, hey, here's your data, now it can say, hey, look at this bar chart. I mean, in other words, we are not teaching models to describe interfaces, we are teaching them to build them. Right? And C1 works like a middleware between LLM, your backend logic, and helps the entire system to generate the UI. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I mean, that connects beautifully to something you mentioned earlier about designing not just screens, but the rules that decide how screens evolve, I guess. I want to build on that a little bit more. Can you talk to me about some of the most exciting real world applications of generative UI that you've seen so far?
Sure. So, I mean, for us, analytics has been one of the hero use case. I mean, take dashboards for an example. Today, if you want to explore, let's say, some performance data on your BI tool, you have to kind of pick filters, you have to adjust parameters, you have to manually build things, and it's always static, right? It might show some data, but that data might not be relevant for you, or that data might not be relevant for everyone. With generative UI, that entire process collapses into a single intent. You could just say, show me the performance by region and highlight, anomalies or something. And the system can generate interactive dashboard, charts, filters, insights, already connected to the live data. So no setup, no configuration, no templates. It feels like, dashboards build itself as you speak to it. So that's one of the big use case. On the consumer end, think of like personalized shopping. So right now, e-commerce is full of static grids and endless scrolls, right? Imagine a system that understands your intent. So you could say something like, "Hey, find me a minimalistic black backpack under $100, which is waterproof and can be delivered tomorrow." Right now, with this, what if the system could figure out what's the best way to present this, gets the data from the system, and the interface adjusts on the fly. It shows the relevant product, lets you compare specs, and even render a quick checkout panel right there. So discovery, comparison, purchase, all in one, seamless flow. That's another way generative UI could help you. And even in education, for an example, the impact could be very deep. I mean, instead of pre-scripted lessons, you could have like learning environments that morph in real time based on how the student is doing. If someone is struggling, it could make things simpler, show more visual cues. If someone prefers seeing diagrams, then you could generate diagrams on the go. If some students prefer pictorial, references, you could add pictures to the same lessons. It's like having a personal tutor that constantly reconfigures the learning interface to fit your pace and style. And there are a lot of other, I mean, honestly, every AI experience that we have today can be improved with generative UI. It could be search. I mean, look at how search is today, right? Google typically shows the same template page for every single thing, no matter what your intent behind that search is. So in generative UI world, you might ask, show me design trends in 2025 from top studios and summarize what's gaining traction. And instead of showing the same boring blue links, it could figure out the best way to represent this information. Maybe like a gallery of visual examples, charts of keywords, some embedded case studies and whatnot. So the applications are endless. You could build customer support tools. You could build internal co-pilots, all the AI assistants that we use today, ChatGPT, Perplexity, and whatnot. Everyone could benefit out of generative UI. And we've kind of run a lot of experiments around this. We in fact tested about 145 users across the globe, and 83% of those users prefer a generative UI output over, the traditional output. So from all aspects of engagement, this is great.
That's incredible. I think it changes completely how we think about scaling design. I think it's amazing to see users interact with something that feels very alive. I'm sure it's an exciting time, not just for the designers, but the users as well.
100%. I think now users have started asking for better experiences, right? Now, we speak to so many customers, and they're questioning the fact that why are we stuck with these modern day terminals? Like, show us something that's more interactive, dynamic, visual.
You mentioned adaptability earlier, which ties beautifully into this next topic. In generative UI, how does Thesis balance consistency with personalization, especially when every user might see something different in their screens? And I'm also curious, when it comes to defining and testing success, do you focus more on efficiency or personalization, or just the overall user experience as a true measure for success?
So consistency in design has traditionally existed for two reasons. One is it made things easier to build, so developer convenience. And the second one was it helped users to learn through familiarity. So it made it easy to, I mean, if you had repeated patterns, things become easier to use. Now with generative UI, both of these things, shift. Because when the system can build the UI automatically, you no longer have to optimize for developer convenience. That's handled. Front end is automated in a way. And when personalization becomes almost native to UI, familiarity isn't critical because the interface adapts to you. So I'll give you an example. Imagine my grandmother is using a payment app. Now, normally she would have to learn where to click, what each icon means, and maybe she'll call me for help. And that's when I need some familiarity, right? I need, like, she needs to see the same things I see. But what if she could just say, I want to pay my bill, and the system instantly renders the simplest version of that UI? Maybe with bigger text, better contrast, no clutter. So she doesn't need to learn this anymore, right? The UI, in fact, learns what she's trying to do. And that's the power of generative UI. It makes technology feel very intuitive. So we stop measuring success by, sameness and familiarity. We start measuring it by clarity. How quickly can someone act? How confidently can they do it? The entire efficiency aspect, right? The time taken to task completion. In fact, like in the same research, we figured out about 64% people could do the same task way faster with generative UI, right? And we tested this against, Chat GPT's deep research experience. So today on deep research, when you type in something, it mostly, asks you like some five follow-up questions that you have to tediously write down in text. With C1, ChatGPT could just respond with a form that you can just click through and hit enter. And this takes like maybe 10 times lesser time. So the efficiency goes up. Familiarity is not needed because ease of use becomes native. And the ease of building kind of goes away because things are automated. And that's why I think we need to look at both consistency and personalization through a new lens now, where we are not limited by the difficulties of building something, and the user is not limited by the experience being static.
That's such a thoughtful way to look at it. And I love the example that you gave. I think it puts a lot of things into perspective, especially as AI and automation is reshaping on the whole creative world of ours. Looking ahead, as generative UI scales over the next 5 years or so, how do you see apps evolving? The whole role of designers, creativity. I would love your perspective on this. And can you also give us some advice, young UX designers, to stay relevant and upskill as parts of UI creation becomes automated? I mean, I'm sure it must be an exciting but also a scary thing for designers out there. So I want to know what you can contribute to that.
That's a great question. And being a designer, I think I can relate to this entire feeling of it's like a mixed feeling of discomfort but also excitement. I think designers are about to go through one of the biggest transformation in decades. Our industry, our practices, our processes, methods, everything's going to change. And fundamentally, we were creators, right? We would create things. Uh, but now I think we'll have to be comfortable to go from being creators to being curators. So instead of designing every single screen, instead of designing every single form flow, we'll have to teach the system to decide and design it. Right. So in a way, we'll have to curate an experience and help AI build. AI become the creator. We'll also go from designing flows to designing frameworks. And right now, just going back to the example of designing those 7 steps, we are designing flows, right? They're fairly static, and they're fairly deterministic. But now, if those 7 steps are different for everyone, then AI needs to build it, and we need to kind of design a framework so that AI doesn't make too many mistakes in doing that. The third thing that will happen is designers will have to move their focus from being output driven to being outcome driven. So output has always been the screens, high fidelity, low fidelity, this and that. Outcome has always been about the human impact, the business impact, right? What is the eventual end goal of this entire system? So I think those three things are going to happen. Designers are going to move from being creators to curators, from designing flows to designing frameworks, and from focusing on outputs to focusing on outcomes. Now, in the past, designers, controlled every detail. In the future, we'll control all possibilities in a way. So we'll define the rules, we'll define the ethics, we'll set up the guardrails that make these AI interfaces safe, accessible, and human. Right? We'll have to think about privacy, culture, clarity, fairness, transparency, uh, the deeper stuff that sits behind the UI. So it's going to be uncomfortable at first because it's a massive, upgrade to our job descriptions. But it's also uncomfortable because we'll have to give up some control. But at the same time, it's also incredibly exciting. Like we are not just designing how software looks anymore. We are designing how intelligence behaves, how AI behaves, and that's a great upgrade as per me.
Do you have any particular skills that people can use to upskill as part of UI creation?
Sure. I mean, I'll again direct this to designers. If there is one thing I'd say to every designer listening, I would say go all in. I mean, this is not a passing wave. It's not a fad. It's not a trend that will go away. It's a very foundational shift, almost like the internet or mobile. AI is reshaping software from the inside out. Generative AI is going to shape how people experience it. So we can't design for something we don't understand, right? We have to get super curious. We have to learn how these systems think. I mean, you don't need to code, you don't need to be a developer, but you need to get it conceptually. Because only when you understand something and how it works, the limitations of something, the possibilities of what it can do, is when you can use the system to design something more impactful. Because the future of design isn't about Figma and pixels. It will be about understanding intelligence, like I said. I mean, it's on us to make intelligence feel very natural, and I think that's why one advice would be to go all in, to embrace this entire shift, to understand how the engineering behind AI works today, to read a lot more about these fundamental concepts, and if possible, uh, learn how to code things, or at least learn how to make AI code for you. I think that's going to considerably, give you an upper hand.
So essentially, what you're saying is that designers won't be replaced, but they'll just be, probably repositioned to work at a higher level of power, in a sense.
Absolutely. Like I said, it's going to be an amazing upgrade, and all of us should be super excited about it, despite the um, discomfort it's going to cause us.
Yes, I'm sure. That's such a balanced take to not fear, but to adapt. It makes me think maybe the whole real skill of the future is designing systems that can actually design themselves responsibly.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Do you have any parting thoughts for our listeners, Parikshit, especially those navigating this evolving intersection of design and AI?
It's like a super exciting time. There hasn't ever been a better time than being one of the builders. And right now, design will become way more important because developing will become easy. It will become table stakes. In the AI era, developing software is going to become table stakes. So the experience is going to be the differentiator. And I think that's why it's more than important now to have great personality and taste in the way you do things more uniquely. The same cookie cutter things won't scale anymore. They won't give rewards. It won't be as rewarding. In the AI era, developing software is going to become table stakes. We are going to ship software at a speed that we've never seen before. And while so much software gets built, what will differentiate these softwares is the experience and how unique they feel. So I think for every designer, what I would say is have a great sense of uniqueness to your taste. Be very courageous and brave to, break a rules, all the rules you've learned so far. And while you break the rule, I think it's very, very important to make people feel something. As long as you could do that, uh, this entire journey will be super rewarding.
That's such an inspiring note. Like you said, curiosity and adaptability really do seem to be our superpower. Parikshit, this has been such an insightful conversation. Thank you so much for taking us behind the scenes of generative UI and helping us see where the entire craft of UX design might be headed next. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you, Apurva, for inviting me. It was a learning experience for me as well. And I hope this conversation inspires the next generation of designers to do something in a different way.
I'm sure it will. Thank you, Parikshit.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube or on any podcast platform. Follow us on LinkedIn at Through the Corporate Glass. You can leave us a comment on YouTube or send us feedback via our website, throughthecorporateglass.com. We would love to hear your feedback.